Okay, so have you ever just wished you could instantly boost your brain power?
Oh, absolutely. That'd be incredible, like finding a cheat code for your brain.
Right, especially when you're feeling kind of mentally sluggish or facing a big project. And it seems like every day there's a new program or app promising to unlock our inner genius.
Yeah, like the Genius Wave program. Have you seen their ads?
Oh, yeah, those are hard to miss.
They're everywhere. And they make it sound so easy, right? Like you could just activate your Genius Wave with their audio tracks.
And for the low, low price of $39. But do these programs actually hold up? That's what we're diving into today.
We're going to separate the hype from the actual science. And what's interesting is that the Genius Wave actually lists their scientific references on their website.
Okay, so they're at least trying to appear credible.
Right. Which is more than you can say for a lot of these programs.
That's true.
But does the science back up their claims?
Yeah, let's bring it down.
Let's start with the name, the Genius Wave. Is that even like a real thing?
It does sound kind of made up, like something out of a superhero movie.
Right. But it's based on the idea of brainwaves. So our brains are always active, right? And that activity creates electrical signals, these brainwaves.
Mm.
And we can actually measure these waves, and they show up in different patterns depending on what our brain is doing.
Okay, so it's not just like one constant wave. There are different types.
Exactly. Like when you're sleeping,
Huh.
you have delta waves, which are slow and rhythmic. And then when you're awake and alert, you've got beta waves, which are faster.
So are they saying there's a specific genius brainwave?
That's what they want us to believe.
Interesting.
But it's way more nuanced than that. While some studies suggest certain brainwave patterns might be more common in highly creative people, it's not like there's one magical genius ways we can just switch on.
Okay, so maybe they took some creative liberties with the name, but what about the actual research they cite? They have a bunch of scientific studies listed.
Right, let's look at those. We won't go through all 14 of them, but we'll highlight a few key ones.
Sounds good.
So one of the studies they link to is actually an article on Inc.com, and it talks about how, as adults, we tend to become less spontaneously creative.
Oh, yeah, I think I've seen that one. It's a little depressing, if I'm being honest.
Expert speaker chuckles softly.
Mm.
It does make you think. And they cite research from a creativity expert, Ken Robinson, who argued that traditional education systems can actually stifle our creativity as we grow up.
So that part's true. It's not like the genius wave is just making this stuff up. Creativity does seem to decline as we age, right?
Seems that way.
Haha.
But the question is, does that mean it's gone forever?
That's a good question. I mean, can we really reawaken that creativity we had as kids? Or is it gone?
Well, there's a difference between inherent creativity, like what we're born with,
Mm-hmm.
and the environment that allows it to flourish, right? Think of it like a muscle.
Okay.
Even if you haven't used a muscle in a while, it doesn't mean it's gone. It just means you need to exercise it.
Okay, that's a good analogy. So maybe there's hope for us yet. But if the genius wave isn't just making this all up, how do they claim to reverse this creativity decline? What's their solution?
They call it brainwave entrainment.
Mm.
And it's the core concept behind a lot of these brain-boosting programs.
Brainwave entrainment.
Yeah, brainwave entrainment. It's basically using rhythmic stimuli like pulsing sounds or sometimes visual patterns to try and influence your brainwave frequencies.
So they're saying that by listening to their audio, it can actually shift your brain waves to match those associated with, say, creativity or focus.
Exactly. That's the idea, yeah. And they actually cite a bunch of studies on this, on brainwave entrainment, and we'll be sure to link those in the show notes.
Perfect.
But the thing is, the research is still pretty early. We need a lot more research to really understand if and how brainwave entrainment works and what its limitations are.
So it's not as easy as just listening to a track and bam, suddenly you're a creative genius.
Not quite, no. Like, for example, they talk about theta waves. Remember those?
Yeah, those are the ones linked to memory, right?
Exactly. They're involved in memory formation, recall, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the Genius Wave points to research on theta oscillations, showing they're really important in learning. Like, one study found that when people were forming new memories, their theta activity actually increased.
Okay, so they're basically saying, hey, listen to our program, boost your theta waves, and become a memory master.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. But, and this is important, it's not that simple. You can't just crank up the theta waves and expect to suddenly memorize an entire encyclopedia.
Right, because our brains are way more complicated than that, right?
Exactly. There's so many factors at play. It'd be like saying, hey, you know how birds sing more when it's sunny out?
Okay.
So if we just blast bird songs on repeat, we'll have perfect weather all the time.
Uh-huh. Okay, yeah. Maybe not.
Right. It's an oversimplification. While influencing these brainwave rhythms might have some effect, the science just isn't there yet to say for sure. And that's where critical thinking comes in. You can't believe everything you see in an ad, especially online.
No kidding. So it's important to look at these claims with a critical eye, right? Like that statistic the Genius Wave uses, that we're 96% less creative than we were as children. That
Yeah.
always seemed a little,
A little far-fetched.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that 96% figure, total fabrication. The article they cite mentions a decline, sure, but there's no percentage given. It's just a made-up number to grab your attention. Classic pseudoscience.
Wow. Okay, so they're playing fast and loose with the science, to say the least.
Mhm.
What about their claim of boosting your IQ?
Well, they use vague language like enhanced cognitive function, but they never actually define what that means or how they'd even measure that kind of change. And they conveniently ignore that IQ is complex. You can't just hack it with some sounds.
So, bottom line is the Genius Wave is taking some really interesting research on brainwave entrainment, but they're stretching it way too far.
Exactly. They're making these huge promises that the science just doesn't support yet.
So, where does this leave us? What are some key takeaways our listeners should keep in mind, especially if they come across similar programs online making big promises?
Well, first and foremost, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
That's a good rule of thumb for life in general, probably.
Right. And when it comes to brainwave entrainment, the research is really promising, but we're still in the early stages. There's a big difference between what happens in a lab setting and what these programs are claiming in the real world.
Right.
Like, we can't say for sure what the long-term effects are
Yeah.
or if it's even effective for everyone.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a quick fix, but real cognitive enhancement, that takes time and effort.
Yeah, it's not just about listening to a 20-minute audio track and calling it a day, right?
Yeah.
There's no magic button here.
Yeah, no magic button, huh? But I gotta say, even though the Genius Wave might have been overselling it a bit, this whole deep dive has actually made me feel kind of hopeful.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, it's like you said, our brains aren't just static. Even if there isn't some magic shortcut to becoming a genius, we still have so much potential for creativity and learning, even as adults.
Exactly. We're always capable of growth and change. It's just about finding the right approaches that work for us. Not some quick fix, but real, sustainable ways to enhance our cognitive abilities.
Okay, so no magic buttons. But what are some things people can actually do to kind of level up their brain power? If they want to do it the right way, I mean.
Well, a lot of it comes down to those foundational habits, like prioritizing quality sleep. That's huge. When you're sleep deprived, your brain just can't function at its best.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then there's exercise. Even just getting out for a walk can make a difference.
Right, it gets the blood flowing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, there's mindfulness. Practices like meditation have been shown to have all sorts of benefits for our brains, from improving focus to boosting creativity.
So it's really those things we already know are good for us, but maybe we don't always prioritize them as much as we should.
Exactly. They might not sound as exciting as, listening to a Genius Wave track, but they really can make a world of difference.
It's all about building those healthy habits, right?
Yeah.
Supporting our brains in a holistic way. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the Genius Wave. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Just a reminder to stay curious, everyone. Keep asking questions, be critical of what you see online, and don't be afraid to dig a little deeper. And when it comes to those big promises, especially quick fixes for something as complex as our brains, approach them with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Well said. And remember, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to boosting your brain power. So, experiment, find what works for you, and keep those brains buzzing. Until next time, everyone.